Hey everyone, Tony D and Little Joan here with a hot take. We did the first panel at evilcon.con at 4:30, went very well. There'll be another panel, an evening with Tony DiGerolamo at 8 p.m. It's being streamed on Streamlands. You could go to the the site evilcon.com and click on EvilCon Online, and you'll find the channels. I think I'm on channel 2. I was on channel 2 earlier. I think I'm on channel 2 again. But there are 3 channels. You click on it. You could make comments if you'd like to join us. Q&A for writing, basically. That's going to be 8 o'clock. Now, Biden push for equity threatens to bulldoze ideas in Constitution, calling for government to deliver unequal treatment. This is republished by WND from Real Clear Politics by Mike Gonzalez. Unity is not just an empty slogan. It is truly something all Americans should be striving to achieve. Many Americans still share virtues such as attachment to hard work, devotion to principles such as equality, around which a president can create national harmony. We can't achieve unity, however, by refusing to deal squarely with the deep philosophical and constitutional differences that divide us. We only make things worse, too, by deepening these disagreements. This, alas, what President Biden's frantic push on equity and identity politics threatens to do. It bulldozes over constitutional notions that are not just vestiges of old parchment and musty records, to paraphrase Hamilton, but which continue to have a psychic hold on the minds of many, many Americans. To ignore this is reckless. Yet the new president is so determined to sell us equity that he sometimes can't get the buzzword off the teleprompter fast enough. One day, in his second week in office, Biden misspoke and almost said equality, but then backed up and repeated the new magic word, equity. Why was he so punctilious? Is that the word? Why equity and not equality? Because the difference has become enormous under the Biden administration. Equity may sound like equality, but in the hands of Biden, his team, and the professorate dictating the terms from the faculty lounge, it has become functionally opposite. This drives a dagger into any hope of unifying around the foundational principle of equality. Yeah, I agree. There's more here from WND. But this segues nicely into this article from Breitbart, Joe Biden's War on Women Equality Act to End Legal Recognition of Biological Sex. I don't know, this isn't really all that hyperbolic, because essentially what it would do, the Equality Act, and it's H.R. 5, introduced by David Cicilline, a Democrat from Rhode Island, essentially what it would do would be to enshrine sexual orientation and gender identity in civil rights. This is not an easy thing to do. And the reason it's not easy, it would be different if you say, well, we want civil rights for gay, lesbians, trans people, and, let's say everybody in the immediate LGBTQ, right? That would be comparatively easy. When you add the plus, you're going, in Canada, that letter salad is, I think, 18 letters long. That's a lot of different people, okay? And you're expecting bureaucrats to pick up a form and have, under sexual identity or sexual orientation, 18 different choices. And under gender, at least 5, possibly more. This is what has been a problem on the left side of politics, especially the woke radical left. There are no limits. They don't want to limit anything, including your sexual identity, when you could choose it and when you don't have to. So, if you get up in the morning and feel a little femme, you could identify as a woman and be trans for the day. But maybe at nighttime, you feel a little more aggressive, so you identify as male. There's people on the woke side of this, that's totally legit to them. But that's not a way to run a bureaucracy. People will be exploiting that loophole, right? So let's say you got a prisoner. Maybe he's a rapist, convicted or accused rapist, and you're going to put him in jail. Well, he immediately says, well, I identify as a woman. What are you supposed to say to him? Are you supposed to say, well, we got to test you? There is no test. According to the woke left, if he believes he's a woman, he's a woman. So then he gets put in the woman's side of the prison. That is asking for trouble. You can't put a convicted rapist in a woman's prison. You can't. It would be a disaster. You'd basically be putting a fat guy in the candy store. It wouldn't be safe for the women. But according to the woke left, it doesn't matter because everybody's the same. If that's the case, then why have male and female prisons at all? Why not just have prisons and have male and female and just make them all random? Maybe you get a cellmate who's a woman, maybe you get a cellmate who's a man. Or the many other genders that they propose. That, again, sounds like a formula for absolute disaster. And some of these wokies, woke-tards, I'll call them, think that, they're being Marxist and communist. I mean, it tends to go hand in hand with that sort of nonsense. If you look at China, China's not doing this. No way. China, in fact, just came out recently saying that they're trying to make men manlier. That they're engaging in exercise of increasing masculinity amongst their population. They are working on a super soldier, which is separate, but still. So I don't know what magic formula these people are following. They think, I guess they came up with this on their own. They think it's science, but it's not science. There's no scientific basis for this. There's no scientific basis for gender dysphoria. People with gender dysphoria just feel differently. There's nothing wrong with that. My friend is a trans woman, and she went through a transition, and it was a long, arduous process. And that makes sense to me, that it was a long process, because it doesn't seem like a small deal to change your gender and how you present. That seems like a huge, huge, huge deal. And I would think that the truly trans women out there, or men, have to think long and hard to come to terms with that. And there's nothing wrong with having some amount of aid for these people, but it's a very tiny slice of the population. Tinier than even the audience for women's sports. And, to pass such a broad piece of policy, a piece of legislation that would change everything just for this tiny group of people, isn't going to make things easier for those people. In fact, it's going to make it worse. Because when things grind to a halt because of one person in whatever setting, it draws attention to them. Now, the people who are truly dealing with personal issues in this area, well, they don't want that attention typically. They might want some attention. They might want to talk to somebody. They might want to deal with family members and whatnot. But they don't want the whole world watching them go through this very personal process. But there are people who, on the other side, who are not going through anything personal, who just want attention and are willing to use any means to get it, including pretending to be trans. And there are gender trenders out there. They pretend to be trans. And there will be a hell of a lot more if you pass this legislation, because now there'll be money in it. You'll be able to gain something by saying, oh, I'm trans. Oh, now I get to go into the clean bathroom on the women's side. Now I get to see boobies while I get changed. I mean, you can't fault me for it if I'm a trans woman who's also gay. This is the can of worms the Biden administration is opening up with this. And they don't care. They absolutely do not care. Because at the end of the day, you have a press secretary, Jen Psaki, who goes up every day and goes, oh, well, we appointed a woman to head this. It's like, so what? If everybody's the same, what difference does that make? But to these woke idiots, it makes all the difference. Because their wokeness has to be addressed. And what is their wokeness? Well, it's their virtue signaling and, hey, I'm a great person, look at me. The Biden administration wants everybody to go, hey, this is such a great administration, look what it did. Instead, the exact opposite is going to happen. The Biden administration will go down in history as the administration that destroyed women's sports, and we had to elect someone else to straighten out this mess. This is going to destroy things. It's not going to help. It's going to destroy. Now again, trans people, LGBTQ+, whatever, they deserve rights. They should be treated like everybody else. That is equality. But when you start pushing equity, when you try to make outcomes the same, that's essentially what the communists tried. And it ended with everybody being poor and starving. That's the only way to achieve equity, to destroy everything and give people nothing. And it won't even be equity. Joe Biden isn't about equity. Oh, Joe Biden's about money, about stacks from China. His whole family is rich. Do you think they want to be equal to you? Do you think Bill Gates and some of the other rich elites want to be equal to you? Want the equity outcome that you imagine? No. When they say equity, they mean that's for the peasants. The peasants get an equal amount of stuff. Not them. Not the people in charge. The people in charge get everything they want. You peasants, well, you get equity. In other words, we give you 5 crumbs each. And you should be happy we give it to you. This will end in resentment and horror if it's passed. So I suggest that we all write our local congressman, because it's going through the House right now, and say politely, why are you signing on to this bill? This is not equality. This is insane. Don't pass this act. This is not what trans people need. Trans people want to be treated just like everybody else. I know, because my friend is trans. She just wants to be treated like everybody else and live her life. This bill isn't going to do that. So, the Republicans, are they going to make hay out of it? Absolutely they will. But, you have to look at this. This is a very nuanced and difficult situation. From Breitbart News here, a new study examined students who claim to have gender identity issues found that compared with 45% of the students who are comfortable with their biological sex, 78% of gender-disturbed students met the criteria for at least one mental health problem. And that's not slamming people who are trans. That's just the stats. It's, again, a difficult transition. It could scar you, especially if you have problems transitioning. Perhaps a bill helping people transition, giving them a road to do so outside of, say, high school, where a lot of pressure is applied to people, outside of, its own thing, where people can have private conversations about it, because it is a very personal thing. But the Equality Act, all it's going to do, it's going to create a situation in which women's sports is dominated by trans women. Completely dominated. Simply because they are biologically born differently, I'll say, and they can't get rid of that. They can't petite themselves. And they're athletes. And they are born with greater muscle mass than biological women. It's just a fact. So we have to get past this. We cannot feel our way through biology. I've got broader shoulders than women. I'm a man. It's not a crime to acknowledge that. It's not a crime to acknowledge it, how you were born. I'm sure if the person who is a trans woman could snap their fingers or go through a procedure, they would love to be petite, a petite little woman. Why not? If they, want to be more female, sure, I'm sure they would love that. And maybe sometime in the future, there will be a process for which that can be achieved. But it doesn't exist now. The technology isn't there. So, what is the Equality Act really going to do here? It's just going to erase things. It's going to make things less clear. And in policy and legislation, you need to make things more clear. Or you leave it up to the bureaucrats to make the decision. You pass these legislations and say, ha, I'm going to get reelected now. I did a good thing and it's wonderful. Meanwhile, bureaucrats have to deal with this stuff. They have to put it into practice. You're asking older people who may not even be familiar with all the gender types that the LGBTQ plus acknowledges. And trust me, you won't be able to acknowledge enough. So I think this is bad. EPPC fellow Mary Rice Hansen commented on the far-reaching consequences of the passage of the Equality Act, warning that the measure would extend the federal octopus into almost every aspect of Americans' lives, imposing gender identity requirements that effectively snuff out sex-based rights of females, endangering parental rights, and silence religious believers in the public squares. Hansen continued, make no mistake, if the Equality Act becomes law, children in every public school in America will be sold on a cult concept of the human person, that who we are is self-identified by feelings regardless of biological sex. Female students will be forced into silence or required to celebrate when yesterday's male's classmates announces he identifies as a girl and demands to shower in the girls' locker room, compete against her in sports, and claim for himself the hard-won rights of women. The Equality Act is nothing short of a Pandora's box, which, once open, will unleash damaging consequences impossible to undo, she warned. And I agree. So, if you have some time, email your representative and ask them to vote against the Equality Act, H.R. 5, because this is just not going to work.